Hi all, it's Teresa in Gemma's house. Well, I bought a new house and eventually I bought a new mattress. So now all the quilts I made when I was in my previous house, the size doesn't work for this new mattress. So I got the idea to extend the width and length of some of these quilts so the size will work for this new mattress, and at least the quilt will go down to the bottom of my new mattress. So my new mattress is 11 inches high, and I use a 4-inch memory foam mattress topper. So now it's 15 inches high, and I don't like that look, that's for sure. I think I'll start with this quilt. And if you haven't seen my other video that was specifically about how I made this quilt, I'll post it at the end of this video in case you want to watch that too. So it looks like the width extension has to be a good 5.5 inches so that the quilt extends down to the bottom of the mattress. So on the back of this quilt, I had used 2 different flannels, and I just love these flannel backings. They're so cozy. It really makes a big difference. So I think I will use a flannel on the back of the width extension pieces, and on the front I'll use a cotton. I don't have anything in my stash that would work, so oh well, I have to go to the fabric store. I found this black and white print that I'll use for the border all the way around. I need at least 5.5 inches to go down to the bottom of my mattress, so I'm going to cut these strips to be 7.5 inches high. That will account for 2 seams and some shrinkage. And then I did get a flannel. It wasn't exactly the same shade, but it will be close enough. So I'll cut the strips 7.5 inches from this fabric too. Okay, so if you're wondering about the math that I did to figure out how much yardage I needed for the fabric for the front of the border and the fabric for the back of the border will be the same. Here's how I did the math. For those of you who have trouble with the math, maybe this will help. So this quilt is roughly 84 inches by 84 inches. So I'm cutting 7.5 inch strips, and those will be on both sides. Accounting for 1/2 inch seam where I sew it onto the quilt, that would leave 7 inches on both sides then. And that equals 14 inches. So when I go to sew this piece then on top and bottom, it's 14 inches longer than the original dimension. To add all those lengths up then, I would take the 2 original sides, which are 84 inches and 84 inches. And then for these 2 lengths, it's 14 inches more. So that's 98. So adding that up, it's 364 inches. That's how long the strips have to total for all of these borders. So I bought a piece of fabric that is 44 inches wide, the usable fabric, which is pretty standard for cotton fabric. I'm cutting the strips this way. So I'm dividing 364 by 44 inches, the width of the fabric. So that's 364 divided by 44 inches is 8.3. So that's how many strips I have to get out of the fabric here. So I have to round up this number to the next full number. So I have to round up 8.3 up to 9. So I need 9 strips. I'm cutting them 7.5 inches high, each strip. So that's 9 times 7.5 inches. That equals 67.5 inches. So I need 67.5 inches long to be able to have enough fabric. So 36 inches to a yard, I'm going to divide 67.5 divided by 36 inches in a yard, and that came to 1.875, which is 1 7/8 yards. So I just bought 2 yards of each. So if you have any questions about this math, just leave me a comment under this video and I'll be sure to get back to you about it. So I have this leftover fabric that I had from a lot of other projects. I'll use this as the binding. Okay, so this is the 7.5 inches, and the reason I'm cutting it this way is because I want these variations to go all the way across consistently along the border. If I cut it lengthwise on the fabric, because of the way this pattern is, I'll have one piece that's more white and another piece that is darker. So I didn't want to have that. Okay, so I'll just sew these right sides together and make the length of strips that I need for each side of the quilt. Okay, so I folded the quilt in half so it's a little easier to deal with. I'm going to pin the flannel right sides to right sides on the back of the quilt. Then I'll turn the quilt around and pin the cotton fabric right sides to the front of the quilt, and then I'll sew them along the inside edge of the existing binding. I still have the flannel pinned to the back. I'm just using the same pins I have in here already. I'm just taking them out and putting them through all the thicknesses of fabric, keeping the raw edges together. This will just save me the steps of sewing each of these pieces on separately. Okay, so since I'm sewing through 4 layers of fabric and a layer of cotton batting, I'm using a number 16 needle. And as I'm sewing, I'm feeling along the side of that binding to see where it is so I can sew right along the side of the binding and catching the binding in the seam. And so far, it's looking good. Okay, so time to iron both pieces of this extension flat. And if you're curious, I iron on top of a 3/8 inch wool pad, and I made a flannel cover for it. And I will be adding batting in between these 2 layers of fabric, and then I will quilt with straight lines along here to keep that batting in place. I want this extension piece to have the same weight as the quilt itself. So this is looking nice so far. Okay, so I finished the first 2 sides of the quilt, and now I'm just going to cut these pieces to line up with the quilt. Okay, so now I just have to pin the rest of these pieces onto the other sides. And I center each of these extension pieces on a seam if it's visible, just so they look like they match up nicely. Okay, well, I pulled out a lot of the scraps I had of cotton batting that I had used in a lot of my previous quilt projects. And you might be wondering why I'm wearing a mask. I have found that whenever I'm working with this cotton batting, that it irritates my sinuses for days afterwards. So I'm going to wear a dust mask as I'm working with this cotton batting. After I sewed on the extension pieces, it measures a little more than 6.5 inches. So I'm going to just piece these. I'll zigzag them on the machine to make 6.5 inch width pieces. Okay, so after only a few minutes of zigzagging pieces together, I have a piece plenty long enough for one side already. I'm so eager to use up all of these scraps. I don't like things like this to go to waste. So now I'm going to put that pieced batting on one of the longer sides. And I'm lining it up right on the outside of that original binding so that it doesn't overlap that binding. That would make it too bulky. I'll pin this in place with my curved quilting pins, and that will hold it together so that I can start quilting straight lines across this extension piece to keep that batting in place. So the material that I bought for this extension, luckily my fabric shop was having a really nice big sale. So 2 yards of this cotton fabric and 2 yards of this flannel only cost me $15. So I have about 9 other queen size quilts that I could adjust the width and length on them like I did here. But there are other ways I can dress up my bed to look nice and use my quilts like this. And then there wouldn't be a need to adjust the size of all of them. And I think this is a nice look too. But boy, it is satisfying to do a project like this. And it gives me a real feeling of accomplishment when I have a project like this in mind and it starts coming together so nicely. So I hope this video gave you some good ideas that you can use in your own home. And if you look on my Gemma's House main page, you'll see that I do videos on a lot of different types of projects and crafts. So maybe you'll see something else that you're interested in watching. And if you like this video, can I ask you to please give it a thumbs up? So thanks a lot for watching. Bye-bye.